The next match is Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler in a Kiss My Foot match.
Yeah, earlier, when Jerry Lawler is being interviewed in the locker room, next to him, there's two papier-mâché big feet, cartoon feet.
Oh,
yeah, and he never mentions them. It never gets used anywhere else. There's just two papier-mâché feet that they've made.
He was supposed to have like an artificial foot on.
I don't know.
That looked disgusting.
I don't know.
But he was like, well, there's no way I can get the boot on.
It's clearly in the shot. It's really confusing.
That is great. I love stuff where you see ideas that have gone nowhere, but somehow they've accidentally left them on telly. Amazing. There was always a real big problem with Jerry Lawler, as he is a great heel on the mic. He is one of those guys who is so good at the art of professional wrestling when it comes to talking in a microphone.
Yeah.
But the problem is, he didn't have the build of a WWF heel. He was very, very good at all the riling up the crowd, and the crowd wanted to see him get beaten. But the problem is, you knew when he went up against Bret Hart, he didn't stand a chance.
Yeah.
And that was always one of the big problems with these matches. The only time that he'd beat Hart would be he would cheat to win, but it wouldn't be a thing where it could go either way. You were just waiting either for the denouement, which would be Lawler cheating and getting a cheap victory, or eventually the natural order of things happening and Bret Hart tapping him out with a sharpshooter that was applied much too strongly. Always a funny thing about Bret Hart and Jerry Lawler, which Jerry Lawler talked about years later. Jerry Lawler did all of his stuff, and he would just spend ages on television, week after week, talking about how stupid Bret Hart was, how ugly he was, how stupid his family was, how his mother was basically on death's door, how his father was a moron, a caveman, elderly, stupid. And the problem was, Bret Hart, I think, found it quite difficult to go, he's just doing his job. And Bret Hart would take it a bit to heart.
Yeah.
So many years later, there are a couple of incidents, where they'd had, at the King of the Ring 93, Lawler had attacked Bret Hart after he'd won, and he'd hit him really hard with the throne in the ribs. And Bret Hart, when he took him on at SummerSlam 93, put him in the sharpshooter much too hard and much too long to teach him a lesson. So throughout the whole thing, Jerry Lawler does his job as best he can, and Bret Hart gets rankled by it and then decides to hurt him legitimately. And that's what happens in this match. Lawler does his job really, really well. And what happens is, eventually Hart wins, and he makes Lawler kiss his foot, and he really puts his foot into Lawler's mouth. The funny thing about your foot is you don't have a great deal of control over it.
No.
And imagine you wrestle for 20 minutes, you're a bit sort of like, all my muscles are all going
up, yeah.
and he's just pushing his bony foot into Lawler's mouth, and he's trying to get it deeper in, and Lawler's trying to sort of act, but at the same time not have it touch the back of his throat. And it's so unfair to really sort of like grind it in.
Yeah.
Then Bret Hart makes Lawler kiss his own foot.
Yeah.
Lawler's foot it looks in the shot like it's his hand,
because
it's so far up and so far in his own mouth that Bret Hart is just like, I'm going to fucking twist this in. I'm going to crunch it in.
That's Tony Atlas's music.
Lawler is thoroughly beaten in this. What this ends up being is Lawler has had his own foot in his mouth, and it's so rancid, he has to go and see a specialist dentist who will be Isaac Yankem DDS, and that is the introduction of Kane. So he comes in as the evil dentist Isaac Yankem,
right.
Lawler's dentist. And I did like the fact that it was joined up. That Lawler's foot is so rancid, he has to go to see this specialist dentist who is weird, and then that guy ends up wrestling Bret Hart at SummerSlam. Lawler and Hart, I mean, really, Lawler's only proper WWE feud was with Bret Hart, and it lasted for 2 years. It began at King of the Ring 93, and it carried on going through. It had been due to restart at Survivor Series 1994. Again, they are repeating feuds because there are so few heels around. There's no one who they can feed to Bret Hart. Like Lawler is very good at setting up that angle, but maybe there's no one else they can bring in.
Maybe that's a literal feeding him the heel.
Yes.
I just the graphics on that is just horrible.
Isn't it? They put a big verruca in the middle of the foot on the match graphic as well. The interesting thing about that was, of course, that the feud was interrupted because Lawler had to take a leave of absence after allegations were made against him in regard to child exploitation. And at the time, he went very public about it. And his basic thing was, this case had sort of come out of nowhere because two girls had bragged about having sex with him, and it was entirely made up. And he said that the prosecutor, who he singled out, had just wanted to get her face on TV as the reason why the case had kept going, even after Lawler's lawyer had claimed that both girls had recanted the story entirely. That is not quite what happened.
Okay, I just wanted to get that kind of clear. Thank you very much. But As we said, April the 5th now is the soonest court date, and that's what William Massey, my attorney, and I want. We want to get this thing in front of everybody and let everybody know the truth of the matter, and that it was just a story that was made up, blown way out of proportion, and now we have a situation where the prosecutor is trying to, as you saw there, get her face on TV and get her name in the paper a little bit. But April the 5th, everything will come out to the light there. So now let's talk about some more things like wrestling, which is, something that I really want to talk about because Monday night...
In December 93, in the Pro Wrestling Torch, Wade Keller, the editor, had asked Jerry Lawler if he wanted to say anything about the case that he'd not already expressed publicly. And Lawler had said this, and this was always his story. I think it was made to sound so much worse than it was when the only way it's reported is Jerry Lawler is charged with rape. When in actuality, all it is, here's a young girl who goes to wrestling who claimed to a friend of hers that she had sex with Jerry Lawler. I mean, how many groupies or girls who go to wrestling have claimed to have sex with the wrestlers? Millions. And this just got through to the wrong individual. Well, David Bixenspan, the journalist, a number of years later, he wrote for Deadspin a really good article, and he went through the files that he'd gained about the police investigation through a Freedom of Information request. And it's a very, very different story. Two girls did claim that Lawler, after the wrestling at the Louisville Gardens, had approached them and said, "Why don't you come back to my hotel?" The girls had been totally willing. Lawler had changed his mind, according to his accusers, and had then arranged to meet them the following morning outside the Louisville Gardens in his car. The girls skipped school, and they went in his car. He took them to a hotel. They said they entered the hotel. He took his clothes off immediately. There was masturbation and oral sex while cartoons played on a television in the background. They said that Lawler then took them to a Value City, which was a mall, and onto the Taco Bell, and then he dropped them off outside the Louisville Gardens at 2:00, which enabled them to get back home, and it made it look as if they'd been to school that day. So that was the accusations that were levelled against him by the girls and reported to the police. Lawler did a couple of interviews. Those interviews were part of the bundle of papers that David Bixenspan got. He talked a lot about the Value City where they went, and he said the girls had been to his hotel room, but nothing had happened. He said he did take them to the local Value City. He told the police he always goes to a specific store at the Value City because they have an unbelievable buy on a certain kind of washing detergent there. Like huge things for like $3. And in Memphis, it's like $12. And so every time I've gone back there, I bought like 3 of them. So I've gone back there to see if they ever had any more of them. He says there's a lot of these bits where he wants to tell you a lot of detail about things that don't really have any relevance to what the police were asking him about. He was spotted at the Value City with the 2 girls by a witness who was a wrestling fan and got his autograph. Another witness came forward to say that he had seen the 2 girls outside of the wrestling arena that Wednesday morning. And so the girls had been there, and the hotel reported that yes, indeed, on the night in question, Jerry Lawler had stayed at that hotel. Lawler said he knew the girls. He described them as arena rats to the police. The girls said that Lawler was aware of their ages, which were 14 and 15, but he denied anything happened.
But I'm saying more of the more serious accusations of, a woman waking up, or even a guy waking up to an actor or actress, performing a sex act on them while they were sleeping. Something more serious than that. How is that funny?
Well, because,
there was a little bit before the case went public. Lawler had called the girls' homes, where he ended up speaking to at least one of them and or their mothers. The person who isn't identified, who had informed the police about that call, said that Lawler had said they were the key to his getting out of this, and what she needed to do was lie and say that nothing happened. One of the girls maintained that everything that she had said was true, but she was unsure if she wanted to pursue the case in the light of Jerry Lawler's call. In another later interview, one of the mothers had said that Lawler rang and had said if she believed he'd violated the girls, then she should speak to his lawyer and not the police, and the police just wanted to make a name for themselves, and they would be on to the next big case as soon as that one came about. And when he was interviewed by the police, Lawler admitted the girls were in his hotel room. He said nothing untoward had taken place, and he'd not picked them up. They just turned up at his door. And he then said that one of the girls had admitted that she was lying about the story when he'd spoken to her on the phone, and that he had taped her doing so. Now, when he was asked to produce those tapes, the police report says that Lawler became flustered. He then said she'd not exactly admitted to lying, but indicated that on the conversation. After being asked on 2 subsequent occasions to supply those tapes to the police, Lawler's lawyer told the police that he was in fact not turning those tapes over to the police and stated he was not going to allow us to hear them, nor would he turn them over to us. As for the issue of whether the girls recanted their accusations, the retired Louisville detective Mike Redmond, who worked on the case, told Deadspin they never did. Instead, they refused to testify against Lawler. Redmond's interpretation of that decision being that the girls didn't want Jerry Lawler to get into trouble. So on February the 23rd, 1994, Lawler copped a plea for harassing a witness who was said to be a female other than the complainants, and the sex crime charges against him were dismissed. One of Lawler's attorneys said the girl's reluctance to testify was a factor in the deal being made. It's a fascinating article, the Deadspin article. What it is one of those things that people laugh about. And actually, it's a horrible, concerning case. I mean, one of the strangest things that happened was 2017. Someone had tweeted a picture of Pro Wrestling Illustrated Weekly when the story broke. And the headline on it was Lawler indicted on rape and sodomy charges. The sodomy charge was actually oral sodomy, which was the term that was given to oral sex by someone who was under the age of consent.
Yeah.
They tweeted, just found some hilarious pro wrestling content from my childhood in my parents' house at Jerry Lawler. And Jerry Lawler obviously didn't really see what it was and retweeted it.
Oh, wow.
Just a ridiculous thing to do. This story is one of those ones that is, with the passage of time, seemingly far more problematic. With what even laymen know about the way that people who are the victims of sexual assaults can essentially withdraw the confidence to pursue cases, and the way that police handle it.
And it sounds like they were talked to by Jerry Lawler.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, it's not an appealing moment, and it's one of those things that we joke about him being a dirty old man and stuff. It is a horrible thing that lies underneath it, which even if he's entirely innocent of, certainly is. There's some questionable decisions that have been made by Lawler in that time, even if it turned out they weren't criminal.
But I'm talking about more serious accusations, King. I'm talking about actual sexual nature things going on where maybe a man or a woman in power was using their power to persuade someone to do something that they didn't want to do.
No, I don't know. I don't know of anything. I've never heard of anything like that happening before. Yeah. But gosh, the times have just changed so much.
He returned to the company in 1994 and was straight back into the position that he'd left, which, again, is a bit unsettling. Someone's holding up a sign that says, "Hey, Lawler, I got something you can kiss."
Right, okay.
Yeah. I hope it's a fucking adult.
That's real brilliant stuff, Jerry Lawler. My mother always taught me one thing. People that play with the stuff that you play with, I really don't want to be involved with.
Bret Hart in a very odd position in this feud as well. He is one of the biggest stars in the industry, but it's not clear where the WWF see him in the grand scheme of things. They want Shawn Michaels to be the number one big star. Diesel is being pushed as the champion, and Bret Hart is stuck wrestling Jerry Lawler, who just spends ages talking about how stupid and dumb and smelly he is. I mean, it's a really odd position to be in. The match is fine. It's classic Jerry Lawler Memphis wrestling. It's a lot of riling up the crowd. It's a lot of low impact maneuvers. It's a match that you never ever need to see more than once. The issue being, of course, as I say, Lawler was never presented as an actual physical athletic threat in the WWF. Hart gets beaten up for most of the 10 minutes before he just locks that sharpshooter on, and he keeps it on for much too long. I mean, always trying to hurt Jerry Lawler's back, which, after the bit we've just been through, it's sort of hard not to sort of go, I hope it really hurt.
Bret Hart, open it up. Open it wide. Throw him in. Yeah. Lock it. That's where he belongs.